In the Blue Ridge Mountains, spring dawn breaks soft and pale. A thin veil of fog drifts low through the valley, catching the rising light like a fragile net of silk. The air is damp, cool enough that the breath curls white before vanishing into the morning stillness. Beneath a cluster of pines where last autumn's needles still form a rust-red carpet, a small life stirs. Ash, a bobcat kitten no larger than a man's open palm, lies curled against the damp earth. His fur, mottled with faint spots, clings to a frame leaner than it should be. At 4 weeks old, his eyes, though they should have opened by now, remain sealed in a congenital blindness that will never fade. Yet there is no sound from him, no mewling for warmth, no desperate cry for the mother who is gone. He waits, his small chest rising and falling in a rhythm both fragile and unyielding. The world around him is alive. Wood thrushes call from the trees, their fluted notes echoing across the hollow. A crow's rough caw splits the stillness. Dew slides from pine needles to dark soil, carrying the faint scent of resin and wet bark. The stream nearby babbles in its endless journey, indifferent to the silent vigil unfolding on its banks. Life continues, unaware of the tiny figure lying in patient hope. Bobcat kittens depend on their mothers for nearly 8 months, learning the silent language of hunting and survival. Without her, Ash's chances would seem nearly non-existent. Yet there is a dignity in his waiting, a refusal to cry that makes him seem older than his days. His ears twitch, tuned to vibrations most could not hear, as though listening not for his mother's steps, but for the very pulse of the earth itself. It is easy to think of wild creatures as loud in their need, fierce in their will. But more often, their survival is a quiet one, a life shaped not by outcry, but by patience and resilience. Ash does not know words like abandonment or hope, yet his stillness carries both. He waits not because he believes help is coming, but because waiting is all he knows. Perhaps you have felt the same, the sense of sitting in silence while the world moves forward without you, wondering if anyone notices that you remain behind. The quiet moments when grief presses in, or when the absence of someone once vital makes the air itself feel thinner. In those moments, we understand something creatures like Ash embody with every breath. Sometimes survival is less about fighting and more about enduring. The morning sun inches higher, its light spilling gold across. The valley floor casting long shadows between the trees. The warmth touches Ash's fur, and for the first time in hours, he shifts, lifting his small head toward the brightness he cannot see. His blind eyes remain closed, but his ears turn, catching the faint rustle of a distant step. The world is changing, though he does not yet know it. This is not a story of noise or sudden miracles. It is a story of silence, of two beings who had nearly faded from the world's notice, finding each other in the quiet spaces where presence matters most. Over the months that follow, a bond will form, not through force, but through the quiet courage to stay. And in that staying, both a blind bobcat and a grieving man will learn that love does not need to be loud to be real. If you've ever felt invisible and hoped someone would truly see you, subscribe now to join others who believe every soul deserves to be witnessed. Tell me in the comments, when did an animal change your perspective on life? The Blue Ridge Mountains awaken slowly, as though reluctant to release their grip on the night. Mist clings stubbornly to the valley floor, wrapping the pines in gauzy veils. The air is cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet soil and the faint sweetness of early wildflowers pushing through last year's leaf litter. In this cradle of silence, the world seems to breathe in unison, a rhythm older than memory. Ash lies still in his hollow, a depression formed at the base of a pine where roots twist like fingers around him. His mottled coat blends so well with the earth that one could pass within a few feet and never notice. He does not move often, conserving precious energy. Yet every sound around him is marked with precision. The distant call of a barred owl lingering past dawn, the scratch of a squirrel climbing rough bark, the whisper of wings slicing through the mist. Though his blind eyes have never opened, Ash perceives his world through subtler means. His ears, wide and finely tuned, catch vibrations that others might miss. The faint hum of insects waking in the underbrush, the irregular drip of water from a mossy stone. Even the shifting of air against his whiskers tells him when a shadow passes overhead. In this sensory tapestry, he navigates without sight, bound to the earth in ways that sighted creatures rarely consider. The forest itself seems to shelter him. Early spring is a season of tentative hope here, buds unfurling into green, streams swelling with melted snow, and creatures venturing from winter's scarcity into new abundance. Yet for Ash, abundance is a promise unkept. His mother's absence has left a hollow deeper than the pine's roots. And though instinct whispers for him to wait, hunger grows more insistent with each passing hour. Still, there is peace in the morning. A shaft of sunlight breaks through the mist, laying a warm stripe across the forest floor. Ash turns his small head toward the warmth, ears twitching as though acknowledging the gift. The quiet dignity with which he endures is striking. He does not beg the world for mercy. He simply accepts it as it comes. Bobcats are solitary by nature, their young raised alone by the mother until they are old enough to hunt on their own. In these first fragile months, the bond between mother and kitten is everything. She provides food, warmth, and the lessons of silence and stillness that ensure survival. For Ash, that thread has been severed, leaving him a creature suspended between hope and inevitability. And yet, the valley holds him. The ground beneath him is soft, the air alive with the murmur of spring, the light spilling gently across his fragile frame. Even in his hunger, there is a kind of grace, a reminder that nature's quiet can hold both beauty and sorrow in the same breath. The day stretches onward, the mist thinning as the sun climbs higher. Life stirs around him, each creature moving in the rhythm of its own survival. Ash remains in stillness, not out of defeat, but from the quiet patience that defines his kind. Waiting, enduring, unseen, but present. This is the calm before the world shifts, the stillness before paths converge. For now, the valley keeps its secret, holding both the beauty of a spring morning and the fragile heartbeat of a creature waiting to be found. The sun has climbed higher now, burning off the last of the mist, leaving the valley awash in a soft, golden glow. Shafts of light pierce through the pines, dappling the forest floor in patterns that shift gently with each passing breeze. The air hums with new life, crickets hidden in the grass, the slow buzz of an early bee, and the distant trill of a warbler testing its morning song. Amid this chorus, Ash remains, a quiet presence woven into the fabric of the woods. At first glance, he seems fragile, a creature ill-suited to the wild demands of survival. But watching longer reveals something more profound. Each subtle turn of his head, each twitch of his ears, carries a sense of knowing. Though blind, Ash reads the world through the quiver of whiskers against the air, the faint tremors of footsteps through the soil, the scent of damp moss carried on the breeze. Where others would see a limitation, Ash lives an ancient truth. Survival is less about what is lost and more about how one listens to what remains. His fur, though thin from hunger, still carries the mottled beauty of his kind, soft grays and muted browns that let him vanish into the forest floor. Tiny paws flex now and again, claws just beginning to sharpen, a promise of the hunter he was meant to become. His breath comes steady, if faint, and though weakness weighs heavily, dignity never leaves him. He does not whimper for comfort. Instead, he waits as though trusting the earth itself to cradle him. In the wild, bobcat kittens spend their earliest months wrapped in the constant presence of their mother. She teaches them patience in stillness, the art of listening, the craft of watching without being seen. Ash has inherited this silence, though without the guidance that would have paired it with strength. At barely 4 weeks, his body craves nourishment, yet his spirit radiates a calm perseverance that speaks of something deeper than instinct. From a distance, a rabbit darts between the brush, its quick thrum of movement echoing faintly through the ground. Ash lifts his head sharply, ears angling, nose twitching. He cannot see, but his body responds as if rehearsing a life he may never live. For a moment, he is not an abandoned kitten, but a bobcat, silent, alert, ancient. Then the sound fades, and he lowers his head once more, his ribs pressing against the earth. The air shifts, carrying with it the earthy scent of rain yet to come. Ash turns toward it, whiskers trembling. Though he does not know why, he leans into the promise the wind carries. Blindness has narrowed his world, yet it has made him more attuned to its subtle truths. Where others rely on sight, he listens to the invisible, proving that dignity can reside even in what appears broken. There is a wisdom in his stillness, one not born of years, but of necessity. Perhaps it is this that makes him so haunting to witness, the sense that beneath his fragile body lies a soul already shaped by the quiet weight of survival. Watching him, one feels the pull of recognition, not of pity, but of kinship. The valley holds its breath for him. Sunlight warms his fur. The scent of pine drifts heavier now, mingling with the cool dampness of soil. Life continues around him, each creature in its rhythm, yet Ash remains at the center of a silence that feels sacred. He is waiting, not with despair, but with the quiet faith that the world somehow will answer. For those who have ever felt unseen, Ash is a mirror, not crying for notice, not demanding the world bend to him, but simply existing with a dignity that cannot be ignored. And though he does not yet know it, footsteps draw closer with each passing day, the first hints of a story that will change both his life and another's forever. By midday, the warmth of the sun presses heavily against the valley floor, though the pines offer cool shadows where Ash lies. The morning's golden light has softened, replaced by the steady glare of a maturing spring day. The forest is alive. Squirrels chase one another through the branches. Insects hum in the damp grass, and a woodpecker hammers rhythmically on a nearby trunk. But beneath this lively music, there is a quieter story, one of hunger, steady and insistent. Ash's small body shows its toll. His fur, though patterned with nature's camouflage, now clings closer to his frame. Beneath the softness, the outline of ribs has begun to press faintly against his skin. Each breath he takes is measured, conserving strength as though every movement must be weighed against the cost it will demand. His paws twitch now and then, instinct urging him toward play or practice hunts, but his body lacks the nourishment to follow through. In the wild, a bobcat mother would bring fresh meat to her kittens every day. Rabbits, mice, or birds, her careful hunting would keep her young fed until they could learn the skills themselves. At just 4 weeks old, Ash is not yet capable of survival alone. Without his mother, his tiny stomach remains empty, his instincts pulling him toward food he cannot catch. And still, no cry escapes him. His kind is born to silence. Sound in the wild can invite danger. He endures quietly, his ears flicking at every rustle, his nose working the air for a scent that might bring hope. The forest offers small mercies. A breeze carries the sweetness of budding clover, mingling with the tang of damp pine. Ash tilts his face toward it, whiskers trembling as though scent alone could nourish him. Nearby, the stream continues its endless chatter, a sound that soothes though it cannot fill his belly. He shifts closer, lowering his head toward the cool earth, feeling the faint vibrations of water tumbling over stone. Hunger gnaws at him, but there is no panic in his stillness. Instead, There is a quiet resolve, an endurance born from instincts older than memory. He does not rage against the emptiness. He absorbs it, folds it into the rhythm of waiting. Dignity does not leave him, even here, even now. Yet the truth is inescapable. Without intervention, his chances dim with every passing day. The forest around him is abundant, yet unreachable, a world of sound and scent beyond his grasp. And though nature can be merciless, it also holds the possibility of grace. For even in the deepening silence of his hunger, the faintest echo of footsteps moves closer. Not yet near enough to touch, but close enough that the story of waiting is about to change. For Ash, the line between endurance and surrender grows thinner with each hour. And for the one who will soon step into this valley, the question is waiting too. When the wild presents you with suffering, do you turn away or do you stay? The valley stretched wide beneath a pale afternoon sky, its ridges softened by spring's green haze. Daniel Reeve walked slowly along the narrow trail, his boots brushing against ferns, still damp from the morning mist. A camera hung from his neck, though it had not captured a frame in months. He carried it not as a tool, but as a memory, a relic from a life when his wife had still walked these woods beside him. Since her passing, his photographs had grown silent, as though the world had lost the light worth keeping. He paused at a clearing where the pines thinned, letting sunlight spill across a carpet of wild violets. The air smelled of damp earth and pine resin, the kind of scent that once would have sent him reaching for his lens. Now he simply stood, listening, his eyes unfocused on the valley below. Grief had dulled his senses. The world had grown muted, and even beauty felt like something he no longer had permission to hold. Daniel's connection to these mountains ran deep. He had grown up in a town not far from here, where neighbors valued quiet resilience and the unspoken understanding that nature was not to be conquered, but respected. He remembered stories told by old men on porches about bobcats, spirits of the forest, symbols of patience and strength. As a boy, he had dreamt of seeing one in the wild. Now, at 46, he wondered if he had already seen enough. The soft crunch of leaves under his boots carried easily in the hush of the afternoon. He slowed, sensing something he could not yet see. It was not uncommon for him to pause like this, as though waiting for the forest to decide if it wanted to reveal its secrets. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the air settle around him. Somewhere nearby, a presence waited, fragile, small, yet holding the weight of survival. His grief was a quiet shadow, one that mirrored the stillness he felt now in the trees. The silence that followed his wife's absence had grown so thick it clung to him even here, among the rustle of leaves and the call of distant birds. It was not loneliness that ached, but invisibility. He moved through the world like a ghost, seen but not truly noticed. And as he stood in that clearing, he realized he was not alone in that experience. From a hollow at the base of a pine, Ash lay unmoving, his mottled coat blending seamlessly into the forest floor. Daniel did not see him yet, but the valley seemed to guide him closer with each step. It would not be long now before their paths converged, two lives shaped by silence, one born of loss, the other of abandonment. In the distance, thunder grumbled faintly, promising rain before evening. The air thickened with its approach, carrying the scent of wet stone and the hush that precedes a storm. Daniel shifted the strap of his camera, not knowing that soon he would face the very question that had lingered at the edges of his grief. When confronted with fragile life on the edge, would he look away, or would he choose to see? The first drops of rain began to patter softly against the leaves as Daniel continued along the trail. The air carried the metallic scent of the coming storm, mingled with the sweetness of damp violets crushed beneath his boots. Light dimmed under the gathering clouds, turning the forest into a cathedral of muted greens and shadows. Daniel slowed, his steps careful now, as though some unspoken presence called him to move with reverence. Just ahead, at the base of a pine whose roots curled like ancient hands, Ash shifted. The movement was slight, a small tilt of his head, ears twitching at the sound of Daniel's approach. His blind eyes remained closed, but his body registered the faint vibrations in the soil. He turned his whiskers toward the disturbance, not in fear, but in a wary curiosity born from silence and hunger. Daniel froze. At first, he thought it was nothing more than a patch of mottled leaves against the eauste earth. Then the tiny form resolved itself, fur dampened by the air, a fragile chest rising and falling in uneven rhythm. His breath caught, not only at the sight, but at the feeling that surged with it. He had not expected life to look back at him here, in a forest he had thought empty. Ash did not run. Even in weakness, a wild creature might normally shrink from human presence, disappearing into underbrush with astonishing speed. But Ash remained still, his body conserving what little energy it had. His ears twitched, listening to the rhythm of Daniel's heart from several paces away. In that pause, silence wrapped around them both, the storm's first raindrops the only sound to break it. Daniel's hand hovered near his camera, not from the instinct to capture, but from the instinct to witness. Yet he did not raise it. Something deeper told him this moment was not for photographs. It was for presence. His grief echoed in the quiet figure before him, and for the first time in years he felt himself truly seen, though the kitten could not see him at all. The forest seemed to lean closer, as though it too recognized the fragile tether forming between man and animal. The air smelled sharper now with rain soaking the soil, and the sky flickered with distant lightning. Daniel crouched slowly, careful not to startle, though Ash had not moved except for the faint tilt of his ears. Their awareness of each other held, delicate as a thread in the wind. And then came the dilemma. Instinct urged Daniel forward, the urge to reach, to gather the fragile life before him into safety. Yet a voice from years of listening to wildlife experts whispered caution. Wild creatures are not meant for human hands. To intervene could risk altering what nature intended. But what was nature here? A blind bobcat abandoned, waiting quietly for a mother who would not return? Or the fact that Daniel had stumbled upon him now, at the very moment when waiting could no longer sustain him? Ash breathed shallowly, ears still locked toward the man whose presence filled the silence. The decision lingered unspoken between them. Neither moved, yet both felt the weight of what was to come. The storm gathered above, the world holding its breath for an answer neither of them could give just yet. The storm deepened, rain pattering more steadily through the canopy, though beneath the pines only a light mist reached the earth. Daniel remained crouched, every muscle taut with the fragile stillness of the moment. Across from him, Ash shifted once more, his small body trembling with effort. Yet rather than pulling away, the kitten angled his blind face toward Daniel, ears trained on the rhythm of the man's breathing. For a long time, neither moved. The forest seemed to bow into their silence, branches swaying in the wind, the creek swelling with rain, the occasional crack of thunder rolling like a distant drum. And then it happened. Not an action, but a recognition. Daniel's grief, heavy and wordless, seemed to find its mirror in the tiny creature's patient endurance. It was as though each acknowledged the other's invisible wound. Ash's nose twitched, whiskers trembling, the faintest sign of trust forming in the space between them. He could not see the man before him, yet he did not turn away. Daniel, breath-catching, slowly lowered himself to sit on the damp earth, placing his hands open on his knees. He offered nothing but presence, no reaching, no sudden moves, only the quiet companionship of one who understood what it meant to wait without certainty. In that stillness, Daniel felt a truth rise from deep within. Perhaps survival was not always about strength or skill. Sometimes it was about being willing to endure long enough for connection to find you. He had walked through these woods for months, numb to the world's beauty, unseen by anyone who mattered. Now here, in the gaze of a blind bobcat who could not look at him, he felt more seen than he had in years. The storm whispered around them, raindrops dripping from pine needles, the scent of wet earth rich and grounding. Ash lowered his head onto his paws, but his ears remained trained on Daniel, refusing to let go of the presence that had come into his silence. The agreement was unspoken, yet undeniable. For now, neither was alone. Daniel swallowed hard, realizing the weight of the choice before him. He could walk away, leave the kitten to the fate the wild had chosen. Or he could stay, and in staying, carry a responsibility that would shape both their lives. As Ash breathed in time with the rain, Daniel knew the decision had already begun to take root. If you've ever experienced a moment of perfect understanding with an animal, subscribe now to join others who believe connection transcends words. Tell me in the comments, what's the deepest bond you've felt without words? The rain thickened, drumming softly against the forest canopy, its rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Daniel stayed seated on the damp ground, his jacket slowly darkening with moisture. The silence between him and Ash was no longer tentative. It carried the weight of a decision that could not be delayed much longer. He felt it pressing in on him with the inevitability of the coming storm. Ash stirred faintly, his ribs rising and falling in shallow breaths. Hunger had etched itself into the contours of his tiny frame, yet his composure remained. No cries, no frantic movement. Daniel studied the kitten, heart tightening at the quiet dignity with which he endured. In that moment, he saw himself mirrored back. Someone who had endured grief in silence, waiting without asking for help, hoping presence alone might heal the ache of absence. He knew the ethics. Years of photographing wildlife had ingrained the rule. Observe, never interfere. Let nature decide. Yet watching Ash now, Daniel wondered if silence from him would mean the end of this small life. Wasn't nature, in its own way, offering him this choice? The world had placed the two of them in the same clearing, in the same rain, in the same moment. Could that be coincidence? Or was it calling him to act? A rumble of thunder rolled closer. Daniel pulled his jacket from his shoulders and laid it gently on the ground just a few feet from the hollow where Ash rested. Not to scoop him up, but to offer warmth, to bridge the space between their worlds. The fabric darkened with rain, its scent carrying Daniel's presence forward. Ash's ears flicked, his nose twitching as he registered the offering. Still, he did not move away. Inside Daniel, conflict churned. He pictured his late wife's voice, gentle, patient, reminding him that compassion was never wasted, even when it carried risk. He also heard the voice of a friend, a local wildlife rehabilitator, once warning him, "If you intervene too early, you take away a wild creature's chance to learn independence." Both voices clashed in his mind, the storm outside echoing the one within. Daniel's hand hovered over the jacket, his fingers trembling. He wasn't choosing for himself alone. He was choosing for Ash, too, for the life that had been dealt silence and loss before it had even begun. Was it mercy to step in, or arrogance to believe he should? As the rain softened again, Ash lifted his head. Slowly, shakily, he turned toward the jacket, his nose working the damp air. His whiskers brushed the edge of the fabric, and he lingered there, breathing in the unfamiliar scent. Daniel exhaled, barely realizing he had been holding his breath. The line had been crossed, not with touch, but with trust. The forest seemed to sigh with them. Above, the storm began to drift, leaving the air clean and rich with the smell of wet pine. Daniel knew then that he could not walk away. He had not chosen this moment, but perhaps the moment had chosen him. And in that choice, both lives were already shifting toward something new. The rain eased into a gentle drizzle, its rhythm softening as if the storm itself had paused to watch. Daniel shifted carefully, reaching into his pack for a small container he had packed out of habit rather than intention, a scrap of softened meat left from a lunch he hadn't touched. He set it down near the edge of the jacket, just within Ash's reach, and then leaned back, giving the kitten space. The offering felt both monumental and terrifying. Ash lifted his head slowly, nostrils flaring as the new scent drifted toward him. His whiskers quivered, ears pricked with alert focus. He took a tentative step forward, each movement deliberate, as though testing not only the ground, but the trust between them. His paws pressed softly into the damp earth, leaving faint impressions in the pine needles. Daniel's breath caught. Every instinct urged him to inch closer, to help guide the fragile creature. But he held still. He knew the bond had to be Ash's choice. Hunger pushed the kitten onward, his small body trembling with effort. At last, his nose touched the rim of the container. He hesitated, head tilting, as though waiting for some hidden danger to reveal itself. Then, with a faint exhale, Ash lowered his mouth to the food. The first bite was clumsy, his teeth barely strong enough to tear, but determination outweighed weakness. Daniel felt an almost overwhelming surge of relief wash through him. It was not victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. Still, the challenge was clear. The kitten ate only a little before fatigue overcame him. He sank down onto the jacket, pressing his side into the lingering warmth of the fabric. Daniel watched, heart aching with both hope and worry. Would this be enough? Could he walk the tightrope between offering help and preserving the wild dignity that defined Ash's kind? The forest watched in silence. A robin sang from a nearby branch, its clear notes rising through the thinning rain. The stream gurgled, louder now with runoff. The scent of wet pine lingered in the air, wrapping the moment in a kind of quiet blessing. Daniel whispered softly, though he knew Ash could not understand the words. "You're not alone anymore." Yet doubt pressed in. He recalled the warning again. Intervention could mean dependence. But what was the alternative? Leaving a blind, starving bobcat to a fate sealed not by nature's design, but by cruel chance? Daniel's jaw tightened. He had made his choice. This life would not slip away in silence. Ash's ears twitched at the sound of Daniel's voice, and though he did not move, his body relaxed fractionally against the jacket. Trust, fragile as rain on pine needles, had begun to grow. The path ahead would be uncertain, filled with setbacks and questions Daniel had no easy answers for. But tonight, beneath the dripping canopy of the Blue Ridge, one small life had chosen not to give up, and one grieving man had chosen not to look away. The days that followed unfolded slowly, marked by small victories and quiet setbacks. Spring deepened into early summer, the forest thickening with green. Morning mist still clung to the valleys, but the sun climbed higher and stronger now, drying the earth sooner and filling the air with the hum of insects. Each dawn brought new trials, yet also the fragile hope of survival. Daniel returned every day. Sometimes he brought food, small portions at first, careful not to overwhelm Ash's delicate stomach. Other times he brought nothing but his presence, sitting silently a few feet away, allowing the kitten to choose the pace. Ash responded cautiously at first, eating only enough to sustain his strength, but gradually he began to seek the jacket as a place of warmth. He never cried for more. He endured with the same quiet dignity he had shown since the beginning. Trust grew in increments, like the slow unfurling of a fern. Daniel noticed how Ash's ears no longer flicked with sharp alarm when he approached, but instead tuned to the rhythm of his footsteps. His whiskers twitched at Daniel's voice, soft and low, and though Ash could not see, he began to lean toward the sound, as if recognizing it as safety. Each time Daniel whispered, "I'm here." The kitten seemed to settle more deeply into the rhythm of companionship. The Blue Ridge itself bore witness. Fireflies began to rise at dusk, their glow scattering across the meadow like tiny lanterns. The scent of blooming honeysuckle drifted on warm evening air. Crickets sang through the nights, their steady chorus wrapping the valley in a kind of reassurance. Yet the challenges never left. Some days Ash refused food, his body weak from lingering hunger. Other days he grew restless, pawing clumsily at the earth, instincts urging him toward a life beyond the safety of Daniel's watch. Daniel wrestled silently with each setback. Was he doing enough or too much? He recalled speaking once with a biologist who said bobcats were born to solitude, their independence forged early by necessity. Was he risking Ash's wild spirit by offering care? The question haunted him as he sat in the half-light of dawn, watching the small creature breathe beside him. And yet, progress was undeniable. Within weeks, Ash's frame began to fill out. His coat grew glossier, shedding the dull thinness of starvation. His tiny claws sharpened, scratching instinctively at bark Daniel had placed nearby. Though his eyes remained sealed, his body moved with growing strength, guided by senses that compensated for sight. He stalked faint movements in the grass, clumsy but determined, as though practicing a hunt he had never been taught. One morning, as sunlight filtered gold through the pines, Daniel watched Ash sit upright on the jacket, ears swiveling toward the distant trill of a songbird. The kitten did not move toward the sound, but the way he held himself struck Daniel. Proud, attentive, alive. It was not just survival now, it was becoming. Daniel raised his camera for the first time since his wife's death. The click of the shutter startled him more than it did Ash. But when he lowered the camera, he felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. He had captured not suffering, but resilience. For both of them, it was a step toward healing. The forest, rich with the scents of pine and damp soil, seemed to approve. As twilight deepened that evening, fireflies blinked above the hollow, and Daniel whispered again, "I'm here." Ash, nestled against the worn fabric of the jacket, tilted his blind head toward the sound, steady and calm. Trust, fragile but real, had taken root in the long days of waiting. By late summer, the valley had transformed. The canopy overhead shimmered in deep green, while meadows swayed with golden grasses touched by the sun's heavy warmth. Crickets and cicadas sang in unison, a steady hymn to the season. The stream, swollen from earlier rains, now moved more gently, its surface catching the last light of evening like a ribbon of silver. The forest no longer felt like a place of waiting. It felt alive with possibility. Ash had changed too. His coat gleamed, soft and full, its mottled pattern blending beautifully with the shadows of the underbrush. His frame had grown stronger, his movements more assured. Though his blind eyes remained closed, he carried himself with a quiet pride, each step placed with the certainty of a creature learning his own boundaries. He no longer trembled with weakness, but moved as though the forest itself belonged to him. Daniel watched with a heart that felt both heavier and lighter than it had in years. He had spent months walking this delicate path, offering food, protection, and above all, presence. He had watched the kitten stumble, recover, and grow. In the process, he had rediscovered his own reason to rise each morning. Grief no longer pressed against him with the same weight. Where once the silence of his empty home consumed him, the silence of the forest now felt sacred, shared with another living soul. One evening, as twilight painted the valley in shades of violet and gold, Daniel lifted his camera again. He framed Ash against the glow of the setting sun, the tiny figure poised at the edge of a meadow, ears flicking toward the unseen life all around him. The shutter clicked softly, and Daniel felt tears blur his vision. This was not a photograph of rescue. It was a portrait of resilience, of life refusing to be erased. For Ash, there was no need to understand the weight of the moment. His body spoke of transformation, strong, steady, patient. For Daniel, the lesson was clear. Love need not be loud to heal. Presence given freely had drawn both of them back into the light. He whispered softly, voice breaking but sure, "You've given me back my sight." Ash, sensing the familiar tone, tilted his head toward him, ears turning as if in answer. No words passed between them, yet the bond was undeniable. Two beings, once broken by absence, had found new life in the quiet courage to stay. If you've ever believed healing can happen in silence, subscribe now to join others who know love doesn't always need to be loud. Tell me in the comments, what quiet moment of healing stays with you? Autumn crept softly into the Blue Ridge, painting the edges of the valley with strokes of amber and russet. The air held a new crispness, the scent of pine now mingled with fallen leaves and cool soil. The stream ran clear and cold, whispering as it slid over smooth stones, its voice carrying the promise of change. The forest, once lush and full, now stood in gentle transition, preparing for the quiet of winter. Daniel walked slowly along the familiar path, each step deliberate, knowing this day had to come. Ash padded just ahead, his coat thickened for the chill, his frame steady with newfound strength. His blind eyes remained closed, yet his ears flicked at every sound, the rustle of a deer in the distance, the crackle of leaves beneath. Daniel's boots. He moved with the assurance of one who had learned to trust the unseen. At the edge of the meadow, Daniel stopped. Beyond lay the deeper forest, a world Daniel knew he could not follow. He set the worn jacket on a low rock, the fabric carrying months of shared moments, then crouched beside it. Ash paused, whiskers brushing the air, then turned his face toward the sound of Daniel's voice. "You're ready," Daniel whispered. The words trembled with both pride and loss. Ash stepped closer, brushing against the fabric before moving toward the tall grasses. For a moment, he hesitated at the threshold of the wild. Then, with the patience that had always defined him, he took a step forward. And another. Just before the forest swallowed him, Ash turned his blind head back. Ears pricked, whiskers twitching, as though acknowledging the presence that had never left his side. The look was not with eyes, but with something deeper, an understanding that needed no words. Daniel felt tears blur his vision, though his chest carried a warmth that steadied him. He knew the bond would remain, even without daily presence. Ash was not his to keep, and yet, in letting go, Daniel felt more whole than he had in years. The sun dipped low, casting golden light across the meadow, as Ash disappeared into the underbrush. Daniel lifted his camera one last time, capturing not the kitten, but the trail of light left behind. It was enough. He stood quietly, the forest humming around him, and whispered, "Thank you." The valley seemed to answer with the rustle of leaves and the call of a distant thrush. Because sometimes presence is the greatest gift we can offer, and sometimes the ones we release leave us more complete than when they came.